Hello there, this is my Vincent Black Shadow 1954. Quite a rare bike these days. They didn't make that many of them. It's one up for the Rapide, and I love this bike with all my passion, and it's the only Black Shadow I've owned. It's a beast of a motorcycle, absolute beast. I'm smiling just looking at it. What can I tell you about it? It's what we call in the trade, or a term that's only happened recently, it's an all matching numbers bike, which means the engine number, the frame number at the front here, and the frame number here is all correct as it left the factory, which is quite unusual now because a lot of things were changed over. Since the 50s, the bikes would go wrong, very rarely, but they'd go wrong. Something would crash, put another engine in it or put another front frame in it, and things got mixed up. Also with this bike, it's got the original registration number and the original buff logbook from when it was first registered. So it's what we call full provenance. It's got the big, obviously looking at the shadow here, it's got the, if you want to come and have a look around the front, it's got the big 5-inch speedo, which is 150 mile an hour. The bike wouldn't quite do that. You'd probably see on a good day just over 125 flat out lying on the tank, which is a phenomenal speed in the 50s. If you have a look here, it's got the factory optional extras. It's got the flange Dunlop rims. These are the original rims. Normally Vincent would have a 20-inch on the front and 19 on the back. This has got a 19 on the front and a 19 on the rear, which was an optional extra for the Shadows. It just made them a little bit sportier. Again, black engine, that's how you denote it is a Vincent Black Shadow. You could say, well, it could just have a painted black Shadow, but they always have a B. Your camera probably won't pick it up. They also have a B in between the numbers, and that B denotes that it is a Black Shadow. So if anybody tells you, oh, I've got a Black Shadow and it hasn't got that B, it isn't a Black Shadow. It's a Rapide with a black engine. Nothing wrong with the Rapide, very obviously established bike in its own right and established model. It's just the Rapide was the touring version, the Shadow was just an out-and-out road burner. And it's the words used probably too much, but it is a legend of a motorcycle. It's an absolute legend.
If you enjoy our videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, click the notifications bell and give the video a like. We value every one of our subscribers, and your support really does help us make more videos.
It's all about the engine on this bike. It weighs a ton. I'll give myself a hernia lifting this engine out, but the bike's so well designed. It's got these stands here. If you ever wanted to remove the engine, you take these stands here, blocks of wood underneath, and you actually unbolt the front steering. There's some bolts here, and you pull the steering head away, and you lift the rest of the bike away from the engine. So you'd put your crate here, and if you wanted to remove the engine, it's so well designed. Take the front frame with the forks out, and then the rear frame, you lift it away with so you'd leave the engine there like something like a motor guzzi. They do the same. You actually pull the bike off the engine rather than struggling. Huge kickstart here to turn that big 1000cc engine over. Big kickstart, and as I say, up here you've got obviously your brake, your clutch, and on the other side, that little lever hanging down on the left-hand side, that's a decompression lever, because you really would struggle to kick that over on full compression. You know, especially a little man like me that weighs 12 stone, 11.5, 12 stone. You use the decompression lever, you give it a good kick, and then you let go and it will start. We'll show you that when the bike's running later on. Open exhaust, being the sports model, quite loud actually, and it absolutely barks. This bike has been restored. It's albeit it's an older restoration. It was probably done about 20 years ago. It's still in absolute mint condition. I've not done that many miles on it. I do ride it. I own a Vincent Rapide as well, which I'm very lucky and blessed to. I do most of my miles on the Rapide. The Rapide is superb condition, but not quite up to the condition of this. I treat this for high days and holidays. I just literally take it out for them special rides. It's a very special bike, and I take it out on special occasions. Like I said earlier, the Vincent Black Shadow is a bike of legends. It does need quite a bit of input from the rider and quite a bit of skill and knowledge about the bike to master it. because it is a beast and it does need mastering. There was a book called Know Thy Beast, which was for Vincents, so you could read the book and actually learn about the bike. You've got to know this bike intimately to actually master it and to get used to its idiosyncrasies. And its foibles, because you know, warts and all. You have to know the bike very well, and the only way you're going to really do that is by riding it and owning one. It's not a bike you can just get on, and like a modern bike, they're very easy to live with. Anybody can ride them, you know. It needs someone that is used to an old classic bike, and they've got a, you know, people say you've got to carry spanners and everything around with you and spare parts. There's a little tool tray here to put your tools in and everything. You've got to be, you don't have to be a master technician. I've got the tools, I actually carry them in a bag. They're not kept here, but there's normally the tools there. You don't have to be a master mechanic or a master technician, but you would have to be mechanically competent to own one of this bike. In the days when these bikes were being ridden in the 50s, you get your handbook, and I can show you later if you want. You get your handbook, and it would show you how to adjust the tappets, how to strip the top of the engine down, how to take the wheels out, how to refurb the brakes, how to adjust the cables. Now you get a modern bike, and it won't tell you how to strip the top of the engine or to strip the clutch. The reason doing that, these bikes aren't unreliable. People used to use these every day. They used to use them for transport to get to work. They used to use them to go down the Ace Calf, if they wanted to go down the Ace Calf, or, you know, the Oak Dean Calf, or whatever calf was around at the time. Take the missus out on holiday down to Cornwall. So these would be, you know, to own a Vincent, you would have to use it like a car. You know, very few people could have a car and a Vincent. So they would do phenomenal mileage. You know, a lot of people now, if they do 3,000 or 4,000 miles a year on their sports bike, they think they're doing a lot of miles. The people that own these used to do 20,000 miles a year regularly. And a good Vincent, in good order, will run easy 100,000 before the engine needs looking at. You know, I've got, as I say earlier, I've got my own Rapide, and that's coming up for 40,000 miles since the engine was rebuilt. And I think it'll do another 40,000 before it'll need looking at least. You know, but as I say, it does need a special person, and I don't mean a special, I mean a person that understands mechanics and understands the beast, and is quite competent to service and even sometimes do the odd roadside repair. But it doesn't mean the bike's unreliable. I've travelled all over Europe on British bikes, and I've never had to get a recovery service. Never ever let me down, these old bikes. Riding it is, wow, riding it, you just can't stop smiling. You know you've got a 1000cc bike under your legs there when you're riding it. It's not huge, great brake horsepower like modern bikes now, 150, 200 brake horsepower, and I ride them myself. You don't need the big horsepower, it's the torque. That engine will pull from 20 mile an hour in top gear right up to its top speed, 125 mile an hour. And on a windy road, B road, or even a windy A road, a good rider can leave, I'm not talking about racing, I'm talking about riding, not on the racing on the road, I'm talking about riding. A good rider on a Vincent can leave what we call a clean pair of hills to a chap on a modern CBR 900 or an R1. You'd be very surprised. It's a very, albeit it is a 1954 bike, it's a very well accomplished bike, very good turn of speed, and it handles superbly. You can absolutely have the pegs down round corners. It handles without a fault. I've spoken to people and they say, oh, Vincents don't handle, they wobble when you go around. I'll say, you've ridden a worn out one. If you've ridden one that the suspension, the steering head, the tyres are in line, the wheels are in line, the brakes are set up, there is probably, in my opinion, a very few bikes that will handle as well, a finer handling bike than a Vincent, with a good turn of speed. And it's even, as I say, 1954 bike, it still keeps up with modern traffic, absolutely. And it would cruise at motorway speeds and more all day long, all day long. You know, you can sit this bike at 80 miles an hour, all the way down to the south of France and all the way back, and it would just be ticking over, high tick over. What else can I tell you about riding it? You've got to get out and enjoy it. A lot of Vincent owners, a lot of people think they're all, how can I put it, affluent, posh guys. You know, they're not. A lot of them are working class like myself. They've worked all their lives to have a Black Shadow. Even when Black Shadows in the 90s, you know, still a lot of money in the 90s, a Black Shadow would have set you back about 20 grand, which is a lot of money for a working man. But a lot of people put their heart and soul to actually own one. And most people that own Vincents are like Porsche owners. They actually drive them, so you know, and ride them and do, you know, not horrendous, huge miles on them. That's for want of a better word. Absolutely phenomenal miles on Vincents. And most people that own Vincents, to repeat myself, are riders. Actually, you know, they use the bikes and they love the bikes with a passion. It's not just about owning it. Some people have to have a bike to own it. You know, a possession. Not me. I love riding this bike. It's a bit too nice to ride in all weather, so I use my Rapide. That is, as I say, I'm very blessed to have a Rapide as well. My Rapide is the bike that does, it's a jack of all trades for me. If I want to, you know, go down to Port, you know, just jump on it to go down to Portsmouth from here, or, you know, I want to get on the ferry and just take it down to France. I've got some friends in France. I'll just jump on that and take that. But the Black Shadow is a very, very special bike. Although we were talking earlier, I love this bike with a passion. You mustn't look at it, you know, with some people look at it with rose-tinted glasses. They do have their idiosyncrasies, which is a word I used earlier, and their foibles. Fantastic design bike. The engine is absolutely magnificent piece of engineering. But they do have a few little traits, shall we say. We mentioned earlier the side stands. No way would I trust that bike on its side stand by itself. I personally think they're quite bad design for side stands. They're very good to put both of them when you want to get to the engine, like we were explaining earlier, removing the front part of the frame, the rear part. But when you leave it, being such a big V-twin, a huge engine, the bike is very rocky on the side stand, and I wouldn't use a side stand at all on these. I've already had my Rapide fall over because it rolled off the side stand. Another thing is the rear stand is quite an old-fashioned design. It's it goes back from the 20s. Bikes have a rear stand. Bikes now have a main stand, which would normally be here. To put this on the rear stand, you've got to literally, when you're astride the bike, you get off the bike, you literally got to rest the bike on your hip here, walk to the rear of the bike, put your foot there, wobble a little bit, and then hernia operation coming up. You've got to lift the whole bike on the rear stand. Now, obviously, I'm fairly young, I'm fairly fit, I can do that. But gentlemen, now, you know, when you're getting in your 70s, late 60s, 70s, and even early 80s, that would be quite a hard operation to do. And you'd need an operation after putting on the centre stand, or the rear stand, sorry. But what happens now, which I think Vincent should have done, in my own opinion, there's a Dave Hill centre stand. You can buy them. I've got one on my own Rapide. It would hang from here. You take these brackets out, and he's made some new brackets, and you'd have a tread down centre stand, and it makes the operation much better. You literally get off the bike and you literally just, like a normal stand on a trunk, you just press down and it puts the bike on its that's a centre stand. That is a very good design. Another thing which is part of the era of the bike is the 6-volt lighting. If you have a look at this this has got a bigger headlamp, it's got a 6-inch headlamp. But the earlier Vincent used a 5-inch headlamp, which is, this is a 7-inch headlamp. Earlier Vincents used a 6-inch headlamp. You've only got 6-volt electrics. Now, when you're travelling speeds over 100 mile an hour, which this bike is more than capable of, it's not very, how can I put it? It doesn't inspire confidence to be going into a bend at 100 mile an hour or 90 miles an hour and have 6-volt lighting. Again, if you, an upgrade you can, as with the centre stand, you can have these converted to 12 volts and halogen lights. So if you're going to ride your Vincent a lot, I would certainly, this is still standard 6-volt, I would definitely go to a 12-volt conversion. You can see where you're going. It's a safety issue, and it doesn't detract from the originality of the bike. They still have points. Points and condensers was quite an old thing, and a magneto, which is quite reliable, and I personally prefer a magneto. But another modern thing you could do, which is an upgrade, is you can fit electronic ignition. So it makes it less maintenance, and arguably more reliable. Once the electronic ignition is fitted, it's fit and forget. So that would make it more reliable. Now, another little thing that happens on these bikes, if you have a look under here, and a lot of people say, oh, your bike's leaking oil. It's leaking oil. There's a breather here, under here. That's a breather pipe. Now, bikes, they used to, when they get hot, the crankcase gets hot, the gases and everything, they need to go somewhere. It breathes literally out to atmosphere, it vents to atmosphere. They weren't environmentally friendly in the 50s, so you'll see it dripping oil or leaking out oil. It's not actually, it's meant to and designed to do that. So it's not the bike leaking. You know, if I pull up somewhere, they go, oh, bike's leaking. It's meant to, this is people that are used to modern bikes. Modern bikes now, obviously, they breathe back into the air box and then they'd get reburnt into the engine. So, you know, it's a closed system. This doesn't have a closed system. So, you know, there are things on it. You can improve the designs. Another thing, which is, we're talking about kicking it, put it on the centre stand as you get older. You can fit electric start on these. So you can have the tread down stand, 12 volt electrics. You can have the electronic ignition. And so be it, if you don't want to start it on the kickstart, if you've got a gammy leg or bad knee, or if you're getting a bit older, bad hip, you can fit an electric start with the 12 volt conversion, which literally you just have a button on the handlebars and press the button. Now, I'm quite against that myself, because I think if it hasn't got a kickstart, it's not a classic bike. But that saying, when I'm in my 70s, I want to still ride my Vincent. So I'm sure I would go to the dark side and fit an electric start on it. That's something I would probably do, even though I frown on it a bit at the moment. So there are upgrades you can do on these bikes to bring them up to the modern days. You know, although in their old guys, the 50s guys, they're still more than capable and able to keep up with modern traffic. We were talking earlier about the rider's handbook, and how a rider's handbook is so different to when you buy a modern bike now, where, you know, it'll just maybe tell you what the tyre pressures, and maybe, if you're lucky, how to adjust the chain and what oil to put on it. This is an original rider's, reproduced exactly the same as the original one. Grease-proof paper, because you get your hands dirty. This is, and I've got original ones, but they're a bit moth-eaten now. This is, I'll show you. If we have a look here, we can have a flip. It's showing you how to strip the clutch. Now, if you buy yourself a Honda or a Triumph, because the average man in the 50s, how to change the tyre, we go through, showing you how to time the engine up. Yeah, look at that. So, again, how to set the brakes up, how to adjust the gearbox, because, you know, if you wanted the gear changes weren't quite right, and even a strip down of the engine, and to do the cases. Now, this was the norm, you know, and we mentioned earlier about taking the front frame off and the rear frame off the engine with the side stand. See the box under there, side stands out, and you'd lift the rear frame and that away from the engine. Now, your average man, to buy this bike, that was every penny he had. You know, he'd have to persuade the wife, we're not getting a family car, we're not going on holiday for 10 years or whatever. He would buy this. So he would be expected to repair it and service it himself. It was what you did. It was make and mend good and fix and repair. That has been lost. That skill now, I feel, as an engineer and a motorcycle technician, a lot of that has been lost. A lot of people haven't got the skill, or they even want to repair things and to service their own bikes. It was part of the knowing the bike to do that, and you'd have to know the bike intimately. Obviously, they could take it back to a Vincent dealer or to a local bike shop to do any repairs, but these guys didn't have the money. So they weren't just toffs or upper class gentlemen that owned them. A lot of people that own Vincent were working class men, but they done everything in their living and breathing body to own a Vincent. A lot of Vincents that I buy them, unfortunately, and we all die, off deceased estates. And I've got a couple of Vincents in here at the moment. They're totally unrestored, and the gentleman that owned them, both gentlemen with different bikes, they owned them from the day they bought them to the day they died. So they, you know, they've had families, they've had family crisis, everything. But the one thing they would not do is sell that Vincent. Even to the day that they couldn't even ride the bike, it still stayed in the shed. My own Vincent that I mentioned earlier, my Rapide, as well as the Shadow that I ride the most, that was found in a shed, absolutely dilapidated state, of a deceased estate. And again, one owner bike. And Vincents, there's a thing we call Vincent fever. They get under your skin. Once you own a Vincent, you've got a Vincent man for life. A friend of mine in the trade, John, he's even got if he's listening to this, he'll laugh. He's even got a Vincent engine tattooed on his chest. Not just a little bit, on his whole chest. As I say, they get under your skin, Vincents, and you just love them with a passion, you know, like no other motorcycles. And I mentioned Harleys. I love Harley shovel heads, flat heads. I love my Harleys. But all in all, I'm in absolute awe of the Vincent. And they're for riding. They look beautiful. To look at it is a thing of beauty. It looks like it's doing 120 mile an hour just sitting here there, you know. I'm not a show-offy person. I love riding bikes in the dark. I'll go out in the 200 miles, 100 miles. You know, I might go down the West Country or something like that. And on a big open road, and just you and the Vincent with that engine underneath you on a big A road, you're just smiling all the way, even in the rain. I'll show you this other magazine here, and I shouldn't say magazine, it's a parts book. This is a genuine parts book. It's an original, very rare now. It's got the Vincent, world's fastest standard motorcycle, which was true. You know, it's and they're still, as I say, these are all the prices in pounds and shillings. And we'll just go through here very quickly. So you as a working man, you could look up this is the chain wheel. It sits in front of the clutch. This is your primary chain. This is the engine sprocket. That's the driven sprocket. And this is your chain wheels, how you transmit power from the engine to the clutch, then to the gearbox. And of course these parts wear, it's a chain. So your man would learn through this book how to strip it down and replace it. Not because he couldn't take it to a garage, because men and women, you know, we used to fix things. They used to, on a Sunday, they'd repair it themselves and they'd get to know it. And a lot of times they couldn't afford to take it to a bike shop because, you know, they had mortgage to pay, they had bills to pay, rents and stuff like that. Look, even in the parts book, there's a spanner set there, it shows. That would be in the toolkit, you know, tool tray we showed under the seat, and that would get you going if you was out on a long run and you needed to do any roadside repairs, you would. And as I say, it's not because the bike's unreliable. Modern bikes you get a little toolkit, but it's the mileage people did on these bikes. They used to actually ride them, you know. Oh, here's the brakes. Let's go to the brakes. Let's have a look. There we go, this is the Black Shadow brake, and you could buy air scoops, which this has got. High speed, the brakes would get hot. So on this, on the front, you could buy the air scoops, which this has got, the factory air scoop. So when you're riding using the bike at high speed, you get brake fade. The brakes would actually overheat. If you're going into a corner at 80, 90 miles an hour and braking full on, you don't want the brakes to fade and lose their efficiency. So the cooling air would come through here, through this duct, run round the drum and then out the back, and the cooling air would cool the brakes, and you wouldn't lose your efficiency. And it was like a little performance package. You had the fin brakes, drums, and you had the air scoops. And again, this, I think we mentioned it earlier, this has got the performance rims on it, which were Dunlop from the factory. Dunlop rims were available. You'd have to pay extra. 150 mile an hour, 5-inch speedo, that came as standard on the Shadow. You could do little upgrades if you wanted. You know, if you was really, really keen, you could have a super tuned Shadow, which was to lightning spec. You'd probably be looking at probably another third of the price on top of the Black Shadow at the time. So somebody to buy one in lightning spec would be wanting to race it or be very well heeled, have a few bob. But normally the Shadow was more than enough for most men. These are the carburettors we were talking about earlier. When I purchased the bike, these had been fully rebuilt professionally. The front carburettor is you can see it's actually made of bronze, which is correct, a very valuable carburettor, and the rear one was alloy. Now we were talking about the monoblocks earlier. These are more of an upgrade. They're a later carburettor which came out probably late 50s, before this bike was made basically. But there being a monoblock, they have the float bowl attached to the carburettor. Where now if you see these, the float bowl is obviously just bolted to the carburettor. So, you know, it's called a remote float bowl. They're a bit more old-fashioned. More in keeping with the age of the bike, but people did upgrade, you know, as they would get worn out. There wasn't the people to refurbish them at the time, and a set of new ones of these would have been a lot more than a set of monoblocks. It's not a downgrade to have monoblocks. There's a later carburettor Amel made. It was called a concentric. Sometimes people fit concentric carbs on Vincents because, again, they're an upgrade from these. They're not correct or period for the year, but, you know, obviously when Amel brought carburettors out, every 5 or 6 years or 10 years, they'd upgrade them to a more modern design. You know, it'd be cheaper to produce and more efficient carburettor and more reliable carburettor. So it doesn't detract to have the monoblocks or even the later concentrics. One thing I do like myself, I like the traditional. This is a Avon SM rear tyre, period tyre. It's quite square. And the front one, if you have a look at the front, that's a Avon Speedmaster ribbed. I am quite happy to ride a bike and corner it hard with these tyres. A lot of people haven't got confidence in these tyres or the rear. More modern tyres do handle arguably better, but if you've got confidence, these tyres were the bee's knees. Until later on you get Avon Roadrunners, and the other make was TT100s, Dunlop TT100s. So a lot of people fit them, and even more modern tyres, people fit Bridgestone Battle Axes or even Road Riders. Personally, I think they look too modern on a vintage bike like this, but if you want to fit them, it's you riding the bike at the end of the day. So, you know, there's only two bits of rubber and very small contact patch keeping you and that bike on the road. So it's a very personal thing, but my personal preference, vintage bike, I do like the vintage tyres. And they're not, especially the square one. A lot of people go, oh, can you go around corners? Well, if anybody wants to follow me around corners on the Black Shadow, they're more than welcome, but I don't think they're better to keep up. Right, we were talking earlier about the difference in the Rapide, which was the touring model, and the Shadow, which is on the bench there, which is the out-and-out sports model. Right, this is obviously a restored Rapide, similar to my one. This has got smaller carburettors. They're a lot smaller. This is a proper remote float carburettor for it. I'll go and get one from the Shadow. Here we go. One in my hand. Can you physically see the size of the carburettor? You know, I don't have to tell you what it is in millimetres, but you can physically see that's a bigger carburettor, and this is the Shadow carburettor. So it had much larger carburettors. Engine was in a higher state of tune as well. And when you start the bike up, you start a Rapide up, and you start a Shadow, the Shadow just barks. The Rapide is a little bit quieter and a little bit what I'd call mellow, a little bit more mellow. Another thing is, this is the standard Rapide. It has a little speedo here, which is a small standard chronometric speedo. Reads to a mere 120 miles an hour. Now this bike will be more than capable of doing 115 mile an hour plus. So it's not a slow bike by any means. Another thing we mentioned, if we pan over here onto this is a unrestored Rapide, which we have. What we call a barn find. I bought it non-running, got it running. If we have a look at the drums here, this is a standard drum. They've got no fins on them. Can you see that? There's no fins because they were adequate as they were. The fins, as we mentioned earlier, were to cool the heating brake drum and to stop brake fade. Also, it doesn't have the air scoops on, albeit the air scoops on the Shadow were optional extra. So they've been added on from the factory with the alloy wheels and everything. But the actual bike, if you have a look at it, it's got a silver engine, which it's a Rapide. It's got a silver engine. The looks on the Black Shadow, hence the Black Shadow, it was that all black engine and that huge 5-inch speedo. The Rapide is still it's a Rapide. It's still a Vincent 1000, but the Shadow was the road burner. You know, to have a Black Shadow, you were the king, basically. We mentioned earlier about the difference between the Shadow in the workshop there and the Rapide. They're basically the same motorcycle. You know, when they were being built, it wasn't until they had an order in, they'd decide whether it was going to be a Rapide or a Shadow. You know, it's the same rolling sashie. If we have a look here, it's the same wheels, forks, frame, same engine. All it is, the Shadow, you know, and I don't want to detract from a Shadow. The Rapide isn't a lesser bike. It's just in a lesser state of tune. It's like saying having a difference between a Triumph Bonneville, which would have been the Shadow equivalent, or a Triumph Trophy, which would have been, you know, there's less tuned, state of tune, single carburettor Triumph version, you know. Both of these bikes obviously have twin carburettors because they're twin cylinders. Another thing is that the Rapide would have the chrome handlebars, but if you see opposed to the Black Shadow, which has the black handlebars. But saying that now, a lot of Rapides have been built to full Shadow spec anyway. People like the look of the black engine. They like the black handlebars, and a lot of Rapides will have the big clock because they're being replicated now. You can buy reproduction ones. So unless you look, you know the bike, you know, and it hasn't got that B on the engine, it's not really a Black Shadow. But it doesn't detract, you know, anything from a Rapide, because I do more miles on my Rapide than I do on the Shadow. I prefer to ride the Rapide. It's a softer bike, more mellow bike, and more forgiving. The Shadow is a beast. It literally is, you know, it is a beast, and you've got to master it. You can feel that it's more power, it sounds more powerful, and you tend to ride it more aggressively, which I don't think is a good thing on these roads with all the traffic and everything. But I love my Shadow with my heart, but if I couldn't have my Shadow, I'm just as happy to have a Rapide as well. To start it, you've got to turn the petrol taps on. There's one on the right and one on the left. If you're going high speed, you want both taps on. Normally the one on the right is your main tap and the one on your left is your reserve. So when you're running out of petrol, you've got your brake and throttle covered, and you can put your hand down and turn the reserve tap. As you're riding the bike, you don't physically have to stop and dismount. But they have such big carburettors, they drink, and being at 500cc per pot to make the 1000cc, they drink so much fuel. If you're doing anything over 70, you need both taps on. Otherwise, you're going to probably starve the carburettor or the engine of fuel. So you've done that, taps on, you tickle it. There's little ticklers here. I tend to just hold it down till fuel just starts to drip out. And that will enrichen the carbs. That will enough to start the bike. On a very cold day, you've got 2 levers here for each carburettor. You put them on. You know, you've got full choke, half choke, and that's the choke off. And they cut the air off. They're what we call a guillotine choke. So they cut the air to enrichen it. But it'd have to be a very cold day to need them. In this weather, literally tickling the carburettor. Okay, so you've done that. Then you kick it over. You get it on compression. It's on compression. You've got a decompression lever there. Press the squeeze in the decompression lever. Turn the engine over 2 or 3 times. Not trying to start it, just to wet the plugs, to get a bit of fuel in the plugs, and then you're good to go. Then you hold keep the decompression lever, give it a good kick, and as the kickstart is at the bottom of the stroke, you let go of the decompression lever, and the engine the big flywheels take over the rest. They will actually keep, you know, the inertia of the flywheels will start the bike. You'll hear it just start, and you've got to pick the throttle up. It's not like a modern fuel-injected bike or a fuel-injected vehicle where it starts racing. It's being a cold start. You have to a choke. You have to pick up the throttle. It won't just start ticking over. So as soon as you hear it going bump, 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 you pick the throttle up. If you don't, you're going to not start it, and you have to do the procedure again. Decompression lever, just kick it 2 or 3 times gently, not trying to start it. That's it. That's just to wet the cylinders, basically, get a bit of fuel vapor in there. Decompression lever, I'm going to give it a good kick, and when the kick starts down at the bottom, I'm going to release the lever. And if it starts, I'll just pick up the throttle. Nope. There we go, she nearly went. Hang on. Gonna have another go in a minute. That's the excess fuel. There you go. That's it, we're ready to ride, ready to go. Once it's warm, it will get to an even tick over. It's just putting a smile on my face. That's it, once it's warm it will tick over. I'm glad I didn't say it will start first kick. Normally when there's an audience it takes 3 or 4 kicks. Once it's warm it does start first kick, but there you go, that's it really. You can start it if you want to. You can start it sitting astride it if you want to, like that. Says he. Like that. And basically we're ready to go. And to stop it, just put the decompression lever on. As I say, I prefer to start it on the rear stand, but I don't start it with a vehicle on compression or anything like that on the rear stand. I keep the decompression lever, kick the bike, and just as it's at the bottom of the stroke, let it go. To kick it on full compression on the rear stand, it can actually damage the rear stand and or frame. It's not designed for that. So either start it astride or perfectly all right on the rear stand, as long as you have the decompression lever on and let it go. So there's no real pressure on that stand, because it is only a stand. It's not really designed to kick-start it with your full weight on it. Do that up. That's it, make sure it's in neutral, that's it. Oh, that's it. There we go. And literally, just let it go over centre, and that's it.
If you enjoy our videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, click the notifications bell and give the video a like. We value every one of our subscribers, and your support really does help us make more videos. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see more of our videos that we think you'll like. Thank you for supporting the Classic Motorcycle channel.